Hello, and welcome to today's Missio Nexus webinar, Crossing the Communication Divide Between Ministry and Media. I'm Julie Navarra, today's guest host for the webinar. I'm partnering with Missio Nexus to offer webinars that feature ways missions agencies can improve their marketing and communication efforts. Before we get started with the webinar, I want to let you know that Missio Nexus has a group called Communications. If you're involved in marketing or communications with a mission agency, this group is for you. It's a great place for you to meet, learn from, and be encouraged by others in your domain. At the end of the webinar, I'll give you information and instructions on how to find and sign up for that group. There will also be a handout for today's presentation available in the chat near the end of our time. And for today, Clem Boyd is the Director of Public Relations for Infinity Concepts. He's got a rich background of professional communication experiences, from copywriter for a business-to-business ad agency to newspaper reporter and editor, magazine and online content freelancer, and much more. He enjoys running, hiking, reading, walking his dog Buddy, and petting his cat Pixie. He's also an elder and founding member of his local church, where he also serves as a house church leader. Clem, we're so glad to have you with us today. Can you tell us about a current project that you're working on?
Certainly. Thanks, Julie, for the nice introduction. Really appreciate that, and glad to be here. Honored to be here with all of you. My family has a rich background also in supporting missions. That's definitely a passion area for us. But yeah, so one of our clients is Mission Eurasia, which I believe is a member organization of Missio Nexus, and
That's right.
So I've had when I began my role with Infinity Concepts, which is a brand communications agency that is focused on helping ministries and nonprofits reach American Christian audiences. But when I began, the war in Ukraine had already been underway for 3 months. And so although Mission Eurasia is an organization that was founded in 1991 to plant churches and reach people for Christ and grow people into maturity in their discipleship all across the former republics of the Soviet Union. Since 2022, it's a lot of what they're doing is focused on Ukraine. So in terms of a recent project, their president, Sergei Rakuba, who's originally, he was born in Zaporizhia, Ukraine. So that's his home country. And, but he is living in Nashville, Tennessee now. And, but he went with a team from Middle Tennessee, it's the phrasing they use there, and a pastor from Brentwood Baptist Church, Jay Struther, to basically lead a conference for pastors that are serving near the front lines. So these are people that are probably within a few miles of where the war is taking place. And so they've gathered these people to the Carpathia Mountains in Ukraine, and Sergei and Jay Struther are there building up these really courageous saints. And it's been my privilege to communicate about what they're doing with Christian media, which is my primary focus, but also to general media in Nashville. So
Right.
That's been a great privilege.
Wow, thank you for sharing. That is wonderful to hear. So as we get started today, remember to put your questions in the chat panel as you think of them, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And then there will also be, in addition to putting them in as Clem's talking, there'll be a time for Q&A at the end, and we'll try to cover everything that you're asking. So once again, Clem, it's great to have you with us today. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm going to share my screen with you now. And let's start from the beginning, if I can do that. There we go. So, yeah, I have the privilege, as I said, of working with organizations that are ministries and nonprofits that are reaching out to the American Christian audience. to ask you guys, I'm kind of backing off here for a second, sorry, to pull up a note of mine to myself. But so I wanted to ask you guys a question. How much experience do you have with public relations? And, my question is, and I'll pull this here. Do you have an extensive professional background in public relations? You've served in public relations, but you feel like you're still learning. I've sent press releases, but I've had little contact with the media, or is this a new role for you? And I was just kind of curious to see what the response to that question was. And so look forward to hearing from people about that. To Heather Poobles about this, and she said that there are people that are working in this space who have a wide range of experience. And so I look forward to hearing more about what your experiences are in this area. So, I wanted to also say that I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be on with you today on the 508th anniversary of the pinning of the 95 Theses to the door at Wittenberg. And I know that that's a, maybe you thought today was about Halloween, but actually it's really about that day, because this is the hallowed evening before All Saints Day. And I jokingly have here on my my notes that it's one of the signature events in the history of public relations, which of course it's really the signature event in the history of the church. But and as everybody, I'm wanting to make sure everybody's able to see everything clearly here, but it's one of the signature. I'm sorry, what's that?
We can see clearly.
Okay, great, thank you. So the 95 Theses, obviously, they were the story. And, they became the story. And this was, obviously, like I said, this is something that changed the church. It changed the course of the world. And so there's a public proclamation, which is an aspect of public relations where you're stating who you are and what you believe and what you do. In essence, you're sharing your values, your mission and your vision. PR stories, they raise awareness with the unfamiliar, and they engage and reinforce those who already believe. Public relations stories shared by the media have the impact of word of mouth, but to a much larger audience. I was explaining this to one of our clients recently and saying that, when we promote something, when we say that we've got something great, it's different than when somebody else says that we are doing something great or we have something wonderful to offer. And so having the media be, being a part of sharing your story is an important way for people to recognize the value and the credibility of what you do. And then just on a practical note, PR stories support your search engine optimization by creating link backs for media websites. And in terms of people searching for you, PR stories can serve a very important role in that regard. So those are just a little bit of introduction on public relations. And like I said, I had a little fun with connecting it to the 95 Theses. Who are watching today or listening later on already know how we got the name Halloween, but it was because today is the hallowed evening before All Saints Day, which is tomorrow, and which is still a event that's celebrated in the Catholic Church and some other churches. But so Halloween, or the hallowed evening before All Saints Day, that's how we got the name for this particular day that the kids run around in costumes and collect candy. So I love background stuff like that. So I was kind of curious how would you describe your experience with the press? Would you say that your experience, you've got a good relationship with reporters? They feature you often? Um, or would you C, is the press a mystery to you? I send stories, but I never hear back. Or D, I do not try to connect with the media at all. And so if you have a response to that, I'd be interested in seeing your answers in the chat. The media can be mysterious at times. I know even in my experience with them, I can feel as though I've done, I've got a great story to share, and that I've got something really important to say, and I may send out a press release and not get, even a acknowledgement from anybody that they heard from me. And other times I send something out and it feels like the floodgates open. So my experience has been that, as well as trying to tag into what's going on with the media and what's important to them is something that I think is a work in progress for everybody that's trying to work with the media. So all I would say is keep on swinging, don't give up, keep sending stories out. And especially you have such important stories to say, to tell. You're involved in work that is changing the world, and these are stories that need to be heard. So and part of the effect of that is that it will hopefully create interest in people that may become supporters of your organization, and we know how important that is. So let's talk a little bit more here about, we may wonder, do they see me? Do they see what an amazing accomplishment this is that I've just shared with them? Do they realize how many people this is going to help? Are they aware of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into making this happen? And, at one level, the answer to that question is no. No, nobody really understands the full impact or what went on behind the scenes, except the people that were involved in making something happen. But on the other side, the reality is most reporters do missions, even if they are not necessarily Christian. They respect missions organizations. They respect what you do. Even as a reporter myself, and I was a Christian when I was a reporter, I respected the work that I saw going on with churches and other organizations and the communities where I was serving, but not everything that the churches felt was newsworthy was what I would call newsworthy. And so that may be, like I said, this may be the mystery for you. How do I crack that code? What is newsworthy? And I thought I'd start our time here by discussing that. I call them the 7 C's. And so these things can be very helpful in as you can media. What will get media attention? What will get, for instance, maybe even a placement of a story you write on a website, which is very valuable, like I said, because that creates link backs between that organization and your website. And it also gives a way for people who are reading that story on a media website to come back to you. So the calendar, holidays are always important. We always want to pay attention to what is the big calendar, and do I have a story related to the big calendar that I can share? I know from my days of I was worked in public relations with Cedarville University for a while, and trying to connect things that were going on at the university with the calendar was always very important. And a lot of times media, especially television stations, they're looking for good content around the holidays. The holidays, depending on what holiday it is, it might be kind of a slow time for them actually. And so, just as an example, I was this was more in my personal life, but I was a race director for a 5K event that was the fundraiser for my kids' cross country team, and this was actually another person that was helping us out with it. She pitched this story to local media of our fundraising 5K that happened around New Year's Eve. Well, New Year's Eve is kind of a quiet time. A reporter came out, they covered the story. We got a nice 2.5 minute piece on the local news that evening, and I believe the next day. So pay attention to the calendar. I'll give you another example of a calendar event. A few years ago, I worked with an organization called Magen David Adom. Magen David Adom is the National Emergency Medical Services of Israel, but they have many, they are primarily funded through donor dollars. And this is because of the arrangement that the Israeli government has with them, that they do not really contribute to their budget, which is interesting. But they rely on donor dollars. And of course, since October 7th last year, this has been huge. But the holiday that I decided to send a story out on was Veterans Day. Well, Veterans Day doesn't usually get a lot of holiday attention, but I knew that there was a Christian lady in the Nashville area who had served in the Army, and she was a significant contributor to Magen David Adom. She wanted to support Israel and the Jewish people. And CBN, which is the Christian Broadcasting Network, a reporter there by the name of Gary Lane, picked up the story and did something on this lady and her commitment to financial support of Magen David Adom. So, but that was really a holiday story. Consequence. What's happening at the national or global stage that has everybody's attention? And do you have stories to share related to the big story? I already mentioned Mission Eurasia. So I don't know if you, how much you followed what's going on in Ukraine, but I think it was about 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks ago, Russian missiles targeted a children's hospital. I think it was just outside of Kyiv. And so I reached out to the team at Mission Eurasia, and I said, do you have a team on the ground there that is going to help out with, basically supporting people, helping people through this really devastating loss? And the answer was yes. And that generated a number of media opportunities for this organization because of this thing that they, as part of their mission and their expression of their faith in Christ, they went to help in the middle of this tragedy. So, consequence, do you have something from your organization that speaks into the big story that's happening on the national stage or the global stage? And look for those things. Commanding. Do you have a well-known name attached to your organization's next event? Or do you have a well-known name that's just supportive of what you do? I'm working right now with a Christian filmmaker who has a movie coming out. Actually, please go see it. It's called The Israel Dilemma, Ancient Prophecies. But one of the people that's in the film is Pat Boone. If you remember Pat Boone, I didn't know this. Pat Boone's now 90 years old, and he's still putting out music. And I was just flabbergasted. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Well, Pat Boone, I'm talking with his agent about the possibility of Pat fielding some interviews for us. So I'm hoping movie on a smaller level. Again, going back to races, I helped organize a race for my kids' elementary school. And we had two young ladies, twins, who are marathoners, and they both had qualified for the Olympic trials that year. And so I reached out to them and I said, hey, Tara and Kara, would you guys be willing to be our grand marshals for the 5K? Well, 5Ks don't have grand marshals, but I was like, whatever, I want to get attention for the event. And they agreed. It turns out that they had attended the elementary school, which we were, that we were doing the 5K for. They came in, they did a big event. They showed pictures of themselves when they used to attend that school, Maine Elementary School in Beaver Creek, Ohio, where I'm at. And people, adults and kids, signing up for that event. And Dayton is the home to the Air Force Museum, and they were having a 5K the same day. We actually had more runners signed up than they did. So I kind of took that as like, not me, but God really, that it was just, a good combination of having people who were connected to the elementary school and who were willing to come in, do an event that got kids pumped up about signing up. And then we just had a great turnout and beautiful weather. Of course, 5K events are really dependent on the weather, but we had great weather that day too. Community, if you're a national organization or you're doing something in a particular community, going back to talking about this guy in the film, um, showing in 500 theaters across the United States. And so part of the press angle is talking to media and saying, well, it's going to be showing at this theater in your area, and this theater that's a part of your viewing area, and this theater also that's in your area where your readers or listeners or viewers are. And so trying to connect what you're doing to a particular community, and if there's a way to connect the local media from a community with your person from your national organization, that's always a good thing as well. Considerable, if you've got something that is of scale, the media love stories that have to do with scale. Excuse me. And so if you're embarking on a huge campaign, or you're expanding services in a significant way, or you're expecting a big crowd for an event, going back to Magen David Dome, which I mentioned, there's a church in Asheville, North Carolina, and they have been big supporters of Magen David Dome. And they, after the events of October 7th, they held a fundraising event at the church, and they began hearing back from churches all around their area. If you know where Asheville is at, it's very close to the border there with Tennessee and South Carolina. And it started looking like they could have as many as 1,000 people attending this event from churches in South Carolina and Tennessee and North Carolina. And so the scale of that became the story itself. In fact, that's what I led with. So sometimes you have something that's curious. And when I mean curious, something that's unusual without it being negative about your organization, that could make a reporter very interested in covering what you do. So back when I was a beat reporter for a small daily newspaper in Xenia, Ohio, which is near me, there was a civil trial. How do you put that? Basically, they'd been called to appear in court as a witness. And such an unusual thing. But that story, I wrote the story for our local newspaper, but then my editor submitted that to the Associated Press. And then before you know it, it's appearing on the front page. Small, not huge, but it did appear on a list of stories, national stories in USA Today. So I was like, well, how about that? So you don't know if you've got a curious story, just something that's unusual that your organization has been involved with, something unique that you've done, a unique story even of somebody maybe that you've helped. um, look for those things. The media, they love the unusual, they love the curious, something that's out of the ordinary, and that could be really great material for you in terms of a press release. And then last here on the 7 C's, I would say, courageous. What kind of stories of redemption or overcoming or against all odds do you have? And I know in missions, this is probably one of your greatest strengths. You have so many stories of, your missionaries who are serving at great cost and at great risk in order to get the gospel across to people, and or they've gone through tremendous sacrifice or suffering even, and it's not to take advantage of the suffering of somebody, but it's the idea that this is what it means to follow Christ. And these are stories that really the world needs to hear, especially I think in American society nowadays. There's been kind of a unfortunate development, I would say, in the view that some people have of Christians. And we need this country for the sake of their salvation, but also for the sake of just knowing who you are and what you do. They need to hear redemption stories and overcoming stories and against all odds stories. And like I said, I know that's a strong suit for the members of Missio Nexus. So I want to talk for a minute about how to pitch. When you're sending something to media, whether it's national media that you're reaching out to, or your local, media that are in the area where your offices happen to be, press releases are welcome, but they're not always necessary. Sometimes a short but sweet email might do the trick. I will say this, and this comes out of a report that was commissioned a couple of years ago, but it said that 94% of media preferred a one-to-one email. And maybe we think, oh, well, they're pretty sophisticated. They probably have sophisticated ways of, being reached out to. I know a lot of reporters are on Twitter, and that's a way that some people connect with reporters, is through Twitter. But the fact is 94% preferred one-to-one email. So it's old school, it's not complicated. And if one-to-one email, right behind it was using like a distribution service, reporters respond to that. I know, because we have a distribution service that we use, that it's very effective at reaching out to the media, and it's put me in touch with media that I've dealt with in the past, and it's put me in touch with media that I never knew before. So don't be afraid of a distribution service. If you're sending an email, I'd say, use creative but true subject lines of 7 words or less, short but sweet, that get your story point across. And then it is definitely appropriate to follow up your emails to media with another email or two. And then even on occasion, I'll make a phone call. What I've found with media is interesting. A lot of they are personable people, but sometimes they just don't like talking. I mean, they like talking when they're trying to discover a story and figure that out. But in terms of, language, and it's a good way to go. So, but just a few tips there. So let me just, I'm just going to go from the current slide. Yeah. So again, just kind of curious about how much experience you have writing press releases. Are you very familiar with it? This is old hat to you. You know what you're doing. You've written one, but maybe you could use help with the details, and perhaps you're in this position. Oh, please share that in the chat if you would. One thing with a press release, I always include contact information, and I prefer to put my contact information at the beginning and the end. I always include my email, mobile number and office phone number if I've got it. For me, my mobile number is my office phone number. And then I say always with the press release, remember the inverted pyramid. And let's talk about that for a minute. The inverted pyramid, actually, let me go back. So I was kind of curious myself, and I've heard of the inverted pyramid since I was a journalism student at Ohio University back in the 80s. Very familiar with it, familiar with these 6 questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how. You're always supposed to get those up at the front, first paragraph or second paragraph. And but I was thinking about why is it considered inverted, and I think it's because, for instance, you probably do reports for your organizations, and you might start with talking about, well, we had this, we began the initiative to reach out to villages in southern Cambodia, and this was spurred on by a conference call held, and you talk about kind of the details of what transpired. But then usually by the end of that summary, you're getting down to, and we had 400 positive contacts for the gospel. There were 75 salvations and baptisms that came out. And so the numbers, the impact might end up at the bottom of a summary report, but for a press release, you want all that to come up to the top. You want to lead with that information. So that's the inverted pyramid. And then you can fill in the important details after you get through the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and then other general info to finish things off. So I wanted to just give you an example of a press release I did. And this is just the beginning of it. This is again for Magen David Adom and the sextons and parishes. Winston Parish is the pastor of that church, Trinity Baptist in Asheville, North Carolina, which, by the way, he's been in the press too, because their church has been very involved in the relief efforts in Asheville since the flooding from Hurricane Helene. So if you look up Winston Parish, you'll find him. But he and his family, October 7th, actually, I think this might have been in 22 even, but they went to Israel, and they dedicated an ambulance there. And so I'll just kind of read this quickly. The sextons and parishes of Asheville, North Carolina, have a deep love for Israel that spans 7 decades. Not even one of the worst years for terrorism in Israel will deter their devotion. The Asheville family, along with 95 other Christians from around the U.S., will dedicate a new ambulance for Magen David Adom on Friday, December 2nd at the Marcus National Blood Services Center in Ramla, Israel, about 15 miles southeast of Tel Aviv. Dr. Ralph Sexton Sr., who founded Trinity Baptist, was perhaps the only Jew on a boat transforming Jewish Holocaust survivors in 1951 to the newly formed state of Israel. Winston Parish, a 4th-generation senior pastor, took over the reins of Trinity from his grandfather, is leading his family and his church with the same kind of passion. Trinity raised $120,000 during a 4-hour share-a-thon earlier this year to purchase the ambulance that will be dedicated. And just to kind of go through this, true confession, I prefer a feature lead that hints at the bigger story underneath. And so that's why I have the devotion to Israel, but the fact that they're going to Israel, and I mean, of course, it's just escalated to beyond where it was before. But even then, there were terrorist attacks going on, and there was a lot of concern, and that was rightfully so. But so I bring that up in my first paragraph. But in the second is where I answer most of those W questions. Who is it? The sexton and parish families. What? The dedication of a new ambulance to Magen David Adom. When? On Friday, December 2nd. Where? In Ramla, near Tel Aviv. And then in paragraph 3 and 4, the why. There's this long history of love and support in the sexton parish family, going back to the great-grandfather, I believe, who was on that boat with Holocaust survivors going to Israel. And then the last how Trinity raised the money for the ambulance during a 4-hour share-a-thon. Oops, my apologies. I skipped too quickly ahead. So, but this was before I sent that story out, and I'll go back another slide. Before I sent this story out, I talked with Winston, and he said they were in a kind of a period of time with the media in their area in Asheville, where so I thought, well, this is a compelling story. I'm going to send this out to Christian media in the area. And then I'm also going to send it out to general or secular media to the area. And then I heard from a reporter at WLOS in Asheville, if you're familiar with that area, and she wanted to do a story on the sextons and the parishes going over to Israel to dedicate an ambulance in December that year. And so I think it was one of the first times they'd had any media attention in a while. I'm very grateful, like I said, to God for opening that door. I really look at him as the one who opens these doors, but also that he gave me the inspiration and the direction for the kind of story to share. So, here in terms of what I'm saying here today for you. If you're sending out a story to media about what you do, always include at least one link to your organization's website. I already mentioned this earlier, that you want to have that, because if they place that story online, and even TV stations will do this, then you have a backlink from their website to your website. And that's very important in terms of like raising where you're ranking, on search engine pages, results pages. The backlinks are helpful in raising your profile on those pages if people do searches. If you are talking to a reporter who's a broadcast reporter, let's say radio or television, ask the reporter if they will mention the website or include it someplace. I know for me, I like, with radio, for instance, a lot of times radio reporters will also nowadays they will put the stories that they do, that they broadcast, and they will also record those as a podcast, then placed on the media website page. And so they will include the website name on the radio station website, which is also that's of great value, because that gives another way for people to connect with you and realize, oh, yeah, I heard about them. I remember listening to that. And here's the way to reach them. So again, going back to the October 7th, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Janet Parshall, but she's got a syndicated radio show on Moody. And she had a couple of our clients from Israel on her program on October 7th, and she included their websites on her actual website page. So I was very appreciative and grateful to her for doing that. Excuse me. Determine the audience you want to influence and focus on the media in those spaces. If you're wanting to look for them. And if you're looking for secular, Hispanic, Black, whatever the segment you're trying to reach out to, then focus your efforts there. And it may even affect the way that you write your story. I like to fashion stories for different audiences. So I might take the same story and like rethink it in terms of who I'm pitching it to. And that's something for you to think about as well. A distribution service, which I mentioned to you earlier, is a great way to reach a larger segment of journalists. without you having to dig around and find names and email addresses. Inspire Newswire is .com is our own Infinity Concepts distribution service. If you're wanting to build a media list through a Google search, I would say that that's a great way to go about it. I know for me, I live in the Dayton, Ohio area, and I did a Google search by putting in just a very simple Google search, Dayton, Ohio media. And within seconds, I had a list of radio stations and TV stations and print and online publications that I could send, press releases to if I wanted to. And I'm sure you could probably even put down Dayton, Ohio, reporters, and you would probably get a list. Or for whatever area you're in, if you put those kind of searches in Google, it would help you at least get the beginning of a media list that you could use. And if you're wanting to reach an extensive list of journalists, finding a professional to help you is a good idea. And if you know one, say, for example, Clem at infinityconcepts.com, not a bad idea to reach out to him. And I just have here, in closing up what I've got for you, my contact information for you, Clem at infinityconcepts.com. This will be in the PDF that's in the chat at the end here. My work phone is 724-930-4003 and 478-5047. And please, if connect with me at LinkedIn. Let me know you saw the webinar today and that you would like to connect, and I'd love to do that. So I just want to open it up now if there's any questions.
Thank you, Clem. I'll watch the chat for just a minute. If anyone has any questions, feel free to post them there and we'll get them to Clem. So far, I think you did a great job, and so well that no one has questions for you.
I covered the field so well that there's just no more answers left, I guess, or questions left. So we'll take it.
So none are coming in. So we'll just continue. I'm sure if you think of something afterwards, you have his email address. So feel free to reach out with your question. I'm sure that will be okay.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It really was very informative, and I learned some things, and I know everyone here did. Thanks for the practical kind of step-by-step tips for how to touch with the press and get our stories out there. So